Imagine a world where the lights went out. Not literally, but the intellectual lights. The kind of knowledge that could build empires, cure diseases, or gaze into the cosmos, simply vanished. We often call the period after the Roman Empire's fall the Dark Ages, a time of barbarian hordes and forgotten learning. But what if that conventional story is fundamentally wrong? What if the darkness wasn't a lack of brilliance, but a profound amnesia? A collective forgetting, where advanced understanding wasn't just ignored, but actively lost, leaving us centuries to catch up. Think about it. Roman engineers built massive aqueducts, heated public baths, and constructed multi-story buildings that stood for millennia. They had concrete formulas, were still studying sophisticated road networks and even complex legal systems. Then, for nearly 1,000 years, much of Europe seemed to forget how to do any of that. Cities shrank, trade dwindled, and grand architecture gave way to simpler structures. Was this truly a spontaneous continent-wide regression? Or did something more dramatic, more catastrophic, erase the blueprints? The contrast is stark. One era crafted beauty and utility with incredible precision. The next struggled with basic infrastructure. It's easy to dismiss this as barbarians couldn't keep up, but history is rarely that simple. What if the invaders weren't just destroying, but couldn't comprehend the value of what they were destroying? Imagine a highly advanced alien civilization landing on Earth and mistaking our supercomputers for shiny rocks. Their sheer power could dismantle our cities, but they wouldn't understand the algorithms or the physics behind our technology. Our knowledge of the classical world largely survived thanks to dedicated monks who painstakingly copied manuscripts. But how much was truly saved? Imagine an iceberg. The visible tip is what we have today, but what lies beneath the surface, lost forever. We know countless texts were destroyed, libraries burned, scrolls rotted, unique copies simply never found. What if among those lost texts were treatises on advanced mechanics, forgotten medical cures, or philosophical insights that could have leapfrogged entire eras of human development? The burning of the Library of Alexandria is a historical wound that still pains us. Estimates suggest it held anywhere from 40,000 to 400,000 scrolls, representing the sum total of ancient knowledge. Astronomy, mathematics, medicine, literature. It wasn't just a single event. Other great libraries and centers of learning met similar fates across the Roman world. Imagine the collective knowledge of our internet being wiped out, server by server, for centuries. The intellectual shockwave would be cataclysmic, a true dark age created not by ignorance, but by deliberate or accidental destruction. Consider the Antikythera mechanism. Discovered over a century ago in a shipwreck, it's an astonishingly complex analog computer from ancient Greece, designed to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. We didn't develop anything comparable for another 1,000 years. It wasn't a unique prototype. It implies an entire lost tradition of advanced clockwork and astronomical calculation. How many other Antikythera mechanisms lie undiscovered, or were simply melted down for their metal, their incredible purpose utterly unappreciated by those who found them? Roman medicine, influenced by Greek thinkers like Hippocrates and Galen, understood principles of hygiene, surgery, and even preventative care far better than their medieval successors. They performed complex eye surgeries, understood antiseptic principles through wine washes, and developed sophisticated surgical instruments. Post-Roman collapse, this knowledge largely disappeared, replaced by superstitious remedies and harmful practices like bloodletting. It wasn't just a stagnation, it was an active forgetting of what worked, leading to immense human suffering that could have been avoided. The idea of cities shrinking and knowledge dissipating isn't just about Rome. Places like Palmyra, an oasis city in the Syrian desert, were centers of trade, culture, and learning, boasting magnificent architecture and intricate water systems. After its fall, much of that infrastructure was simply abandoned, its advanced techniques forgotten by subsequent inhabitants. It's a stark reminder that civilization isn't a guaranteed upward march. It's a fragile ecosystem of knowledge and infrastructure that can collapse and be lost, sometimes without a trace. Think about mathematics. Euclid's Elements, written around 300 BC, provided a rigorous axiomatic system for geometry that was foundational for over 2 millennia. Archimedes pioneered calculus concepts, studied buoyancy, and designed incredibly complex machines. This wasn't simple arithmetic. It was abstract, theoretical genius. Yet during the Dark Ages, much of this higher mathematics was reduced to practical accounting or celestial observations. The deeper theoretical frameworks either lost or simply not understood by the few who encountered them. Ancient Greek geographers like Eratosthenes had not only accurately calculated the Earth's circumference, but also understood its spherical nature. They created surprisingly accurate maps based on astronomical observations and mathematical principles. But after the Roman Empire, much of that cartographic precision faded. Medieval maps often became symbolic, focused on religious interpretation rather than geographical accuracy. It wasn't just a lack of exploration, it was a loss of the very scientific method used to understand the world's physical dimensions. The world literally became smaller and less understood, not because it changed, but because the knowledge to perceive it changed. Even military technology shows this pattern. The Roman legions were a marvel of organization, logistics, and standardized equipment, from their iconic segmented armor to their sophisticated siege engines. After the empire's collapse, armies became more localized, less disciplined, and often equipped with cruder, less effective gear. This wasn't because people forgot how to fight, but because the societal infrastructure to produce, maintain, and innovate on such a scale had vanished. It's a subtle but powerful difference. The capability to create complex systems was the true casualty. The Romans enjoyed amenities we consider modern: central heating via hypocaust systems, indoor plumbing, public sanitation. These weren't luxuries for the elite. They were widespread in Roman towns. Yet for centuries after Rome's fall, most European homes lacked these comforts, resorting to open fires and basic latrines. It wasn't just a preference for simplicity. The complex engineering and widespread infrastructure needed to maintain these systems were lost. The knowledge of how to build and operate them simply wasn't passed down or wasn't valued enough to preserve. We often talk about the barbarians destroying things, but time itself is a relentless enemy of knowledge. Papyrus degrades, vellum rots, ink fades. Without constant copying, maintenance, and libraries to protect them, even the most profound texts eventually disappear. It's a silent, insidious form of knowledge loss. Imagine if the internet suddenly stopped working and all our digital archives began to corrupt and disappear over decades. How much would we truly be able to reconstruct, and how much would be lost forever, not through malice, but through simple entropy? The transmission of knowledge isn't just about preserving books, it's about preserving the culture of learning. In the classical world, there were academies, public lectures, and philosophical schools. Education was widespread among the elites, and even accessible to some commoners. After the fall, this network crumbled. Learning became concentrated in monasteries, often focused on religious texts. The breadth of inquiry narrowed significantly, and the vibrant intellectual discourse that fueled innovation largely ceased. It was less about darkness, and more about intellectual isolation. The Roman architects and engineers, beyond their sheer building prowess, understood principles of mechanics, statics, and pneumatics. They used cranes, levers, and sophisticated gearing. These weren't brute force solutions, they were intelligent applications of physics. Yet, for centuries, the ability to build on such a grand scale, to lift massive stones, or to mechanize tasks, largely disappeared. It wasn't just the tools that were lost, but the underlying theoretical understanding of how those tools worked and how to innovate with them. Here's the twist. While Europe was experiencing its dark ages, other parts of the world were flourishing. The Islamic Golden Age, for example, saw advancements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy that rivaled or even surpassed classical antiquity. Scholars in Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba were translating, preserving, and expanding upon the very Greek and Roman texts that were largely forgotten in the West. This wasn't a global dark age, it was a geographical shift in the centers of light. And this shift eventually became Europe's salvation. Imagine all the lost knowledge of Greece and Rome, kept alive and refined in a different language, in a different culture. Then, centuries later, these texts began making their way back to Europe, primarily through Sicily and Spain. Arab scholars had preserved Aristotle, Euclid, and Galen, adding their own brilliant commentaries and discoveries. It wasn't an internal rediscovery for Europe. It was a reimportation, a handoff from another civilization that had kept the flame burning. This exchange sparked what we now call the Renaissance. The reintroduction of these texts was nothing short of revolutionary. It kick-started universities, fueled new philosophical inquiry, and laid the groundwork for the scientific revolution. Europe wasn't just picking up where Rome left off, it was building upon the advancements made by Islamic scholars. The Dark Ages weren't truly dark for humanity, but they were a period of European intellectual isolation, a time when the continent had to borrow back the knowledge it had once possessed, but then forgotten. So, what if the Dark Ages weren't about a universal decline in human intelligence, but a profound and multifaceted process of forgetting and losing? Not just books, but the systems that produced and preserved them. The schools, the libraries, the patronage, the trade networks, and even the simple societal value placed on pure intellectual pursuit. It shows us that civilization isn't a permanent state. It's a constant effort, a fragile legacy that requires careful stewardship. This idea fundamentally shifts our perspective. It moves away from a linear, inevitable progression of knowledge and instead highlights its vulnerability. It forces us to ask, what knowledge are we losing today? Are there skills, crafts, or even fundamental understandings that are slowly fading from our collective memory, dismissed as irrelevant, or simply too complex for our fast-paced world? Is it possible that even in our information-rich age, we are inadvertently laying the groundwork for future dark ages of our own, where current brilliance is simply forgotten?